it just has to be brutal down there to be an Auburn fan, and you're rooting for one of the 15 most successful programs in the country.
Yeah.
But still, it's that direct comparison to Alabama. And when is this thing going to end over here that's in our backyard that we constantly have to deal with?
Well, I'll tell you that it's actually been kind of fun to be an Auburn fan the past few days, because you were just talking to the guy from Kentucky and talking about, taking your mind off of basketball. We're less than 24 hours removed from Auburn coming back against Alabama, down 13 points to upset Alabama back in Coleman Coliseum. Auburn's only ever won there 8 times in the entire Coliseum's history, which was built like in the 50s. And so that was a very big win. And it's funny to see, and we can even go back to some of our discussions that we've had. If you go on YouTube and you watch some of the previous shows where Auburn fans start talking about, look, Gus Malzahn is not our guy. It's time for him to move on. We want another offense. We want another voice. We want different things. You're doing great with recruiting, but you're not developing. It is so funny to actually see the way that Alabama fans are talking about their basketball program, because all you have to do, if you listen to Sports Radio 740, is you take out Gus Malzahn and Auburn football and you put in Alabama basketball and Avery Johnson. It's the exact same conversation. But when you do go look at the football program, when it is Auburn, you're right. It's one of the top 15 teams in the country. But in what we've talked about in the past is this team doesn't even have things like football-only facilities. I was actually over there last weekend, and there are a lot of great things about the university. The campus is gorgeous, but you still have that one big facility. And people don't realize this. South Carolina just opened up a football-only facility. Kentucky football. Like imagine this. Like, it's crazy to say. Like, you guys were just talking about it and how where you had Kentucky football ranked, they now have a football-only facility, and one of the top 15 programs in the country doesn't have that. So you start seeing the way that this program is being looked at nationally and go to what's happening. And yes, everything about this football program revolves around beating Alabama. Now, there's 2 ways we can look at it is, do you want to beat Alabama because they're your rival, or do you want to beat Alabama because if you beat Alabama like you did in past years, that gets you into the national championship. That gets you into the SEC championship. That gets you a better recruiting class. It's all connected. So, yes, you're always going to hear that Auburn wants to beat Alabama because that's always true. But in 2019, beating Alabama opens up the doors for so many things, because if you do it like Auburn did a couple of years ago, you get into the SEC championship as a 2-loss football team, have the opportunity to beat Georgia, make it to the college football playoff. You go back, I just mentioned the kick 6. They upset Alabama, even though it was like a 1-6 football game. They go into the SEC championship, have an amazing football game against Missouri, go and play in the national championship against Florida State. You go back to 2010, the comeback. All of these things all relate to one thing, beating Alabama. And if Auburn can beat Alabama, then yes, they're going to have a football program that can win an SEC championship and potentially win a national championship.
All right, we got Joe Hunk on the line talking Auburn and Alabama, doing some double duty for us tonight as we go across the nation. Basically, what we're attempting to do tonight is bring you as many spring previews as possible, with most teams just a few days away, and some others have already stepped on the field to get set for 2019. So when you look at the entirety of the conference, Joe, it's always been my thought that from about 2005 or 6 until about 3 or 4 years ago, there was no question that the SEC was the best. Mm-hmm. It couldn't be argued by any metric. Now, I didn't think necessarily that it was the gaping gap between number 1 and number 2 that many people did at that point, and I gave metrics and reasons why I thought that the people ran with the groupthink media just and ran with they're the best and nobody can come close. 3 to 4 years ago, the national championship and that streak ran out, obviously, in 2013. And there were some issues in maintaining some of the better coaching in the country, and places like Ohio State in the Big Ten and elsewhere. Of course, Clemson, most notably, were able to beat some of the better teams in the SEC. LSU fell off, Florida fell off, etc. Your thoughts about where the conference stands right now, and will this last?
Well, it's great that we are coming off the NFL Combine, because obviously we've talked about it just a minute ago with Alabama. Clemson won the national championship. The ACC has the national championship. The ACC is a very bad conference. They have one amazing football team in the Clemson Tigers, and we've seen that with a fantastic defense. You're going to see it in a few weeks with the NFL draft. How many of these defensive players from Clemson are going to be going into the NFL? They have an amazing team. That conference is horrible. I mean, it's truly just them. I mean, guys, Florida State is bad. Like, how can Florida State be bad in football? Like, it's almost just unthinkable to have. And then you go and you look at the Big Ten Conference. I love the Big Ten Conference. I love Ohio State. I love Michigan. I love what Northwestern is doing. But the SEC still is going to have the most amount of players going into the NFL this year. And the coaching at one point in time we thought was going to be coaches are afraid of Nick Saban. They just kind of nobody wants to come into the conference until that. Well, Jimbo Fisher just came into the conference, and he was at Florida State, and he's now at Texas A&M, where they have basically unlimited resources that can give him anything that he wants. If he wants brand new turf on the football field, he's going to get it. If he wants a suite built for his family, he can get it. Like, any Texas oil tycoon can build this for him. This conference is getting better. Adding Dan Mullen, who is at a very bad Mississippi State program. It's not that it's a bad program. You just have to recruit differently there. You're not going to walk in to a student's home that's a 5-star and go, you know what? I know that Alabama's looking at you. I know that your big universities like Ohio State, but I want you to come to Starkville, Mississippi, where we basically have Starkville, Mississippi. Like, that's all we have. And even though it can be,
it's Stark Vegas. Joe.
I know.
Come on,
man, it is Stark Vegas, and Dak Prescott just put it on the map. But you have to recruit differently there. You've got to go the JUCO route. You've got to have those different types of recruiting styles. The problem with it is that Dan Mullen was one of these coaches that he could be 8-5. It could almost be like being at Vanderbilt with Derek Mason. And if you just get your team to a decent bowl game, you should be up for Coach of the Year. He's now at Florida, a Florida program that is starting to put more money into its athletic facilities, that's starting to recruit better, that's starting to do a lot of things, and that's making Florida become a better program. Kirby Smart, he's played for a national championship. He was in the SEC championship, and arguably, if he just would have done differently than what he did 2 years ago in the national championship, he would have beat Alabama and played for a national championship or been in the college football playoff. This conference has a lot of good teams and a lot of teams that are very close. Everybody in the river region said when Alabama plays LSU last November, they said that Alabama would be going up against an interim coach because Coach O is going to be gone. Well, he had one of the best teams in the country last year. He helped everybody out by beating UCF. And now you're looking at what he's doing down in Baton Rouge. And this program isn't as bad. If they get a quarterback, which has always kind of been the thing for LSU, they can still be another 10, 11, 12-win team. This conference is still very solid. You can go around. The Pac-12 is horrible in everything. I mean, I'm not just trying to be mean about it, but, I mean, their football programs, again, you just have Washington. You look at the basketball programs, they're only going to be like a one-bid league. All of these types of things, they're only getting like, what, $1 million from their television revenue? So you look around, the SEC is still the best. But you can look at the Big Ten and you can really say that conference is putting together a good conference as a whole. But I still think the SEC has a good firm grip on it.
People, did you hear Joe? Did you hear him back me up on the ACC? I said this almost every day since the end of the national championship game. Yes, you won the national championship, but it's not a conference accomplishment. Clemson won the national championship. Who is your second best team? If it's Syracuse, if it's NC State, regardless of who it is, it's got to be one of those two teams. Basically, they're not as good as a fourth or fifth best team in any of the other conferences, especially the SEC and the Big Ten. There's no comparison. The conference won 9 games out of conference. Joe, Clemson won 5 of them.
Yeah, they're not. It's not a good conference at all.
It just wasn't this past year.
No,
now, Miami can change that. Florida State can change that, but it may take a couple of years. It can turn. I'm not going to say on a dime, but it can turn within a couple seasons. So I'm not damning the conference for the rest of eternity. I'm just saying that it was awful this past season. Duke played really well against its competition, Baylor, Northwestern, and Temple. outside of the conference. And I say that with a straight face, Joe, because where Duke was in 10th place in the ACC, they actually competed well against their like-seeded teams in the other conferences. But Clemson and Duke won all the games. They won virtually all the games, 7 of 9, and the rest of the conference did nothing against anyone.
No, and you had a Miami that, look, it's not the same Miami that ESPN did the 30 for 30s on. It's not that anymore. You don't have the Orange Bowl. There's now a very big, ugly baseball stadium over on that site. You now have to go 30 and 40 minutes outside the city to get to Hard Rock Stadium to even cheer on the Miami Hurricanes. Walking into a recruit's house with that Miami Hurricane logo doesn't mean what it used to 10 and 15 years ago. And partially the same thing goes for Florida State. Look, everybody always wants to get the on-campus visits. You get this on-campus visit, this is where we're going to wow them. This is the reason why yesterday, for instance, the Alabama basketball game against Auburn was so big for Nick Saban, because he had recruits there. He had all these people that were wanting to come to celebrate the Iron Bowl victory, and you always want all these things to look great. If you're Florida State, you don't really have a good football facility. If you're Miami, you don't have a great one. You're getting better. It's getting much better, but you're still a sort of a difficult institution to get into with you being private and the academic standards. There's a lot of things about the ACC that really does need to improve, but it doesn't diminish what Clemson did. Let's be straight about this. Clemson went in and they smacked Alabama around, and nobody's done that. Nobody has done that in a very long time.
Joe, I don't know what to do with this comment. My man DeAndre, he jumps on the live chat and supports Mark Rogers TV almost like a nobody. So I appreciate it, but he is a die-in-the-wool ACC guy. So we go back and forth about the Big Ten and the ACC, and I like to remind him the Big Ten went 5-1 against the ACC this year. It wasn't close, but he did throw me $2. So I really, I have trouble. Really.
You're right. Everything you said is right, man. You're definitely
absolutely
right.
DeAndre. The ACC is the best conference in college football, and he states here that Duke would beat LSU.
Well, are we talking about with your quarterback that's going in the NFL, or are we talking next season? Because I'm telling you, and trust me, I want this game to be competitive. I truly, truly do. But at SEC Media Days coming up in July, what always happens is they bring around the college football playoff committee people, and then they also bring around the ChickfilA Kickoff guys, and they bring around the president of the ChickfilA Kickoff. And we always talk to him, and we're like, okay, so how did this all happen, and how did this – when Alabama got put into this game this year, they said, look, this is what we did. Alabama agreed to want to do it. Now, the reason why you want to play in a neutral site game if you're Alabama is because you get unlimited recruiting visits to the football game. You get paid a ton of money, almost 2 to 3 times what you normally would when you're talking about playing at home. And then, this is the best one, and then you also get to play a big-name opponent on a big stage that everybody's going to be paying attention to. They sent out feelers to the ACC. The ACC, the only team that got back to them that wanted to play in this game was Duke. I want this game to be good. I really want it to be good. Alabama's going to beat Duke by 35 points, and it's going to be ugly. That stadium is going to be half empty by halftime, and it's going to be a very bad look for the ChickfilA Kickoff. They're trying to hype it up. They're like, you're looking at David Cutcliffe. He's done a great job with quarterbacks. This Duke team is going to get smoked. And now that's Alabama. I would love to see Duke play some other teams. I really, really would, because of the way Cutcliffe is done. I'd love to see them pick up a game with Tennessee, with that being his old university. They're going to get killed when this game starts coming up in August. And I really hate it, because I really want this to be good. I love the ChickfilA Kickoff, but I know Alabama's not LSU, but Duke's going to get smoked, and I hate it.
And David Cutcliffe lost his quarterback. We watched him in the NFL Combine this past, and he wouldn't do anything about that 35-point spread either, but he's a really good quarterback, Daniel Jones, but he's gone. And DeAndre, I finally figured it out when you said Duke would beat LSU. It's March. You're talking basketball. Got it. All right.
Hey, don't hold off on that too, because LSU's got a really good basketball.
They really do.
And depends on if Zion's playing or not. If Zion's playing, Duke's winning the national championship. But if you give me LSU right now playing against a Duke team, that'll be really fun to watch.
Joe Hunk from 740 AM The Fallout. We appreciate you stopping by, Joe. It's always a good time.
Thanks, man.
Thank you so much. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football, breaking down spring practice across the nation. And we, again, are providing the service to kind of highlight what we do with the best discussion, debate, and analysis in college football. And we encourage you to check out our offering there at Patreon that was launched this week. Mark Rogers TV, the voice of college football at Patreon.